The sun bore down relentlessly on the cracked earth, each breath a furnace of dry heat that clawed at a lone figure trudging across the barren expanse. A small boy, dirt-streaked and ragged, stumbled through the endless desert wasteland, his eyes sunken but burning with a stubborn spark. Every step was a battle against the unforgiving sand and the silence that pressed upon him like an invisible weight, an unyielding testament to a fight for survival in a place where mercy was as scarce as water. Beyond the horizon's edge, the desert stretched wide and empty, an ocean of ochre and dust under the merciless sky. The air shimmered with heat, distorting distant mesas and skeletal bushes that bent beneath the sun's unrelenting glare. The wind whispered hot and dry through hollows carved in stone, carrying a stillness so deep it threatened to swallow any stray sound and leave only the heavy pounding of one's own heart. It was a land that tested every ounce of resolve, where isolation gnawed at the soul and nature's indifference was absolute. In the midst of this harsh kingdom, the boy moved with a frail but undeniable resilience. His small frame hunched against the sun, lips cracked, skin burnt and blistered. He was alone, an orphan of circumstance and fate, his steps faltering, yet unbroken. Not far away, a figure cut a solitary silhouette against the desert tableau. A cattleman, weathered and worn, shaped by years under the same cruel sun and solitary nights beneath cold stars. His face, furrowed and tanned, bore the marks of countless seasons and battles fought not with guns only, but with the relentless harshness of life itself. Taciturn and steady, he watched the land with eyes both hardened and wary, carrying the weight of solitude like a shadow he could not shake. It was at the fragile edge of endurance that the cattleman spotted the boy, a small shape dipping and faltering among the dunes. The child's exhaustion was stark, yet in his gaze flickered a defiance born not just from youth, but from a spirit unwilling to surrender. The cattleman's instinct urged him to keep distance, to guard the lonely order he'd carved out against the world's chaos. Yet beneath that hardened exterior, a flicker of something softer stirred. Perhaps a memory, perhaps a silent kinship kindled by the vastness that both had endured. Their meeting held a fragile tension, a wary dance of glances and silence. The boy's eyes searched the cattleman's face for threat or salvation, while the rancher's stoic posture barely concealed the turbulence behind his gaze. Neither spoke, yet a language unspoken passed between them, a melding of suspicion and guarded hope. The subtle tightening of hands, the stiffening stance, the faint twitch of muscles ready to flee or fight, all bore witness to the fragile boundary between mistrust and alliance. As they stood there, bound by circumstance and the harsh breath of the desert, the silence was shattered, far off on the horizon. A sudden plume of twisted dust rose, striking upward and spreading like a dark omen across the pale sky. The cattleman's eyes narrowed, recognizing the telltale sign, a group, men on horseback, armed and urgent, cutting through the sun-baked wilderness. Their approach was swift, a threat rolling across the earth like a gathering storm, bearing with it the promise of peril and an unspoken reckoning. The boy and the cattleman locked eyes once more, the unspoken understanding deepening between them. Time thinned, the blistering silence now charged with urgency. Here, in this merciless land, the fragile thread of an alliance began to weave itself, born of desperation and an uncertain hope. Many companions who follow our legends across these forgotten lands have told us that fate, or the treacherous YouTube algorithm, sometimes erases subscriptions without warning. Before the next perilous trail unfolds and a new twist reveals itself, take a quick glance below this video and make sure you're still riding with our band so you don't lose track of the tale. We wouldn't want you to miss any of the voices echoing through this valley. Check your subscription now and join the saga. The cattleman shaded, his eyes against the scorching sun, watching as the boy's chest rose and fell more steadily with each labored breath. The makeshift shelter he'd fashioned from driftwood and scraps of tattered cloth shifted slightly in the dry breeze, an imperfect sanctuary amidst the vast emptiness. The Apache child, still gaunt and fragile, leaned weakly against a sun-baked rock, his skin darkened and peeling from relentless days beneath this merciless sky. "Drink this," the cattleman said softly, holding out a small canteen. The boy's fingers trembled as he took it, gulping fiercely, the precious water chasing away the burn of dust and dehydration. Their eyes met briefly, a hesitance woven into the silent exchange. For all his gruffness, the cattleman's voice carried an unspoken promise. Safety, for now. The first meal was meager, a slab of dried jerky and a few handfuls of cracked corn found in an old pack, but it was nourishment enough to coax some color back into the boy's cheekbones. "You gotta keep your strength," the cattleman warned, settling a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. The touch startled him, eyes flicking up with a wary shadow behind their dark depths, as if weighing the stranger's sincerity. "This land, it's no friend to one's alone," the cattleman murmured, gaze trailing to the unforgiving horizon. "I've seen many lost to the heat, to hunger, to the silence that breaks a man's soul." He looked down at his own weathered hands, cracked and calloused, tools hardened by years in the wild. "You're tougher than most." There was no pity in his words, only respect, fragile and newly granted. The boy nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat. A gulf of mistrust still yawned between them. Survivor wary of salvation, stranger cautious of weakness. Yet beneath the surface, necessity wove a delicate thread, binding them closer. The cattleman could see, beneath the dust and exhaustion, a resilience born not just of will, but of ancient blood, of lessons passed through whispered tales beneath starlit canyons long ago. In the stillness, the boy reached out, fingertips brushing the dry earth. He closed his eyes, murmuring soft sounds in a language older than the desert itself. His hands moved deliberately, tracing invisible signs in the dust, searching. Slowly, with a faint smile curving his cracked lips, he pointed toward a scraggly patch of mesquite trees, the only hint of green in the vast beige. The cattleman watched as the boy led him, limping but determined, to the sparse shade. "These roots hold water," the boy explained, voice low and reverent, "like veins beneath the skin." The cattleman crouched and dug with weathered hands. unearthing a patch of moist earth, rich with hidden life. He allowed himself a flicker of amazement. The land, once so barren, offering up its secrets to those who would listen. As the afternoon sun clawed its way higher, the cattleman shared fragments of his life. Quiet, stony moments revealing the burden of solitude. He spoke of cattle drives long since ended, of a family lost to time and tragedy, of nights spent under open skies, seeking some meaning in the relentless desert winds. The boy listened, eyes brightening with tentative understanding, sensing in these broken truths a kinship deeper than words. But as they gathered beside the fire's sparse glow, the cattleman's sharp gaze caught a change in the landscape. Faint tracks pressed into the sand, fresh and hurried. His voice lowered, steady but heavy with warning. "We ain't alone out here." The boy's body tensed, eyes scanning the empty horizon, the old fear now stirring anew. The cattleman's hand went to the worn revolver at his hip, fingers brushing the cold metal comfortingly. Men coming. Not good ones from the look of it. They hunt for more than water or game. A cold breeze whispered through cracking branches, and a distant drumming of hooves thundered softly in the far distance. The desert held its breath under the blistering light. The boy shifted closer, the weight of uncertainty pressing in. But the cattleman's presence was a shield, worn and weathered though it was. In the gathering shadows of the late day, a fragile alliance solidified, born of necessity, forged through shared survival. Their eyes met once more, unspoken agreement passing between them. Stand together or fall alone beneath the pitiless sky. Ahead, a thin veil of dust billowed like a restless ghost, heralding the coming danger with merciless certainty. The cattleman tightened his grip on the rifle, his silhouette carved sharp against the glowing horizon. The boy whispered a soft prayer to the spirits of the desert, hands lifting as if to invoke protection from unseen forces. And as the distant thundering grew closer, the cattleman's voice was barely audible, yet resolute. "Whatever comes, we face it, side by side." The sun dipped low, painting the wasteland a fiery red, and in that moment, beneath the endless sky, two lonely souls braced for a storm that would shatter the fragile peace and change the desert forever. The dust kicked up by the brutal riders trailed behind them like shadows crawling across the desert floor. The cattleman's grip tightened around the rifle slung across his back. Muscles coiled beneath weathered skin, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Beside him, the Apache child, lean, eyes sharp despite exhaustion, strained to peer across the barren stretch, every nerve alight with the silent threat surging closer. The leader of those ruthless men had come for more than water or survival. Whispers twisted in the arid wind, the kind told around campfires to warn of greed concealed in human skin. The boy's blood, the old stories hinted, harbored something vital, something the hunters believed could be claimed and controlled. But there was no selling the child like cattle, no taming the spirit woven from desert sun and ancient earth. Without a word, the cattleman dropped low behind a fractured sandstone outcrop, the grit burning in his throat as he scanned the landscape for a path of escape. The boy crouched beside him, breath shallow but steady, fingers clutching a carved stone charm at his neck. Their alliance, fragile though it was, pulsed with a shared will to survive. A sudden crack, a branch snapping, or the sharp whistle of wind. Instinct forbade them to linger. They were fired upon, not with courtesy, but with cold intent. Bullets kicked up sand nearby, and the cattleman's heart thundered in his chest. "Run," he whispered, voice gravelly, barely daring to breathe the word before hauling the boy to his feet. They bolted, stumbling over uneven ground, each step a desperate gamble as the hunters closed in. The sun burned like a hammer overhead, sweat stinging eyes and turning dirt to paste beneath their boots. The boy's legs, slender but swift, carried him through the brittle scrub, guided by the cattleman's rough direction. Behind them, the thundering hooves and shouted curses spilled like a storm. The men were relentless, driven by obsession no hardship could quell. Yet the desert, with its shifting dunes and hidden hollows, offered refuge to those who knew its secrets. A narrow ravine cut through the wasteland ahead, shadows pooling in its depths. The cattleman plunged toward it, feeling the boy clutch his jacket as the chase tightened. They slipped into the cool shade, panting and trembling, heartbeats hammering against ribs like war drums. For a moment, the desert held its silence again. The distant pounding retreated, the harsh voices swallowed by the landscape's vast emptiness. The cattleman lowered himself beside the boy, steadying the fragile frame trembling in his arms. "You all right?" the man asked, tone rough, but laced with something softer. Concern that the boy had never expected from a stranger. The child nodded, swallowing hard, eyes wide and unblinking in the dim light. He traced the edges of the stone charm, his talisman and link to unseen forces. As the sun dipped lower, shadows grew long, the desert painting everything a burnt sienna. The boy's eyes glossed with visions, distant and haunting. He fell silent, lips moving in whispers lost to the wind. Suddenly, his body stiffened, fingers clutching the man's sleeve. A quiet tremor shook him, a stirring beneath his skin that was neither fear nor pain, but something far older, far deeper. "Something's coming," the boy said, voice uneven but fierce. "Not just them, something bigger." The cattleman's brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" The child's gaze lifted, fixed on empty space beyond the ravine's mouth. "The spirits speak. You have a role greater than this fight. Not just survival. Something to protect. Something to change." For a breath, the rugged man said nothing, but the desert wind seemed to hum louder, as if the earth itself whispered agreement. He shifted the rifle to rest across his knees and studied the boy, seeing not a helpless child, but a bearer of ancient weight. The night crept over the land like a velvet shroud, cool but charged with expectation. Both sat in silence, patched together by the crackling memories of gunfire and the distant howl of coyotes. Between them, something less visible, trust, fragile yet growing, wove itself tighter than any words could. "We can't keep running forever," the cattleman muttered. "Need a plan, a place to stand." The boy's fingers brushed raw stone again, tracing symbols older than time. There is a place, the sky touches the earth, where the old ones dwell still. If we can reach it, maybe we can find answers. You will see what I see." The man nodded, jaw tight. "Lead the way then." "But if they catch us before then?" "We won't let that happen," the boy said defiantly. His eyes burned with a flame rekindled by purpose, part boy, part something else, intertwined with desert shadows and whispered secrets. But the hunters were not far behind, their cruel voices slicing through the growing dusk. The cattleman rose, slowly, casting a last glance over his shoulder, eyes hard as flint. "Stay close," he said. "The desert ain't done with us yet." As they vanished into the darkening wasteland, the boy lifted his face to the star-poked sky, whispering a prayer. In that fleeting space between hope and fear, the threads of destiny began to twist tighter, tying the fate of a hardened man and an Apache child in a story yet unwritten, where survival alone was never the prize. Beyond, the cruel laugh of the hunter echoed across the dunes, promising a reckoning that would test the bond they barely had, and awaken truths buried deep beneath the sand. The night swallowed them whole, the desert vast and watching, as a vision danced on the edge of the boy's mind, an omen that the battle ahead was not just of flesh and blood, but of spirits bound by time and blood, with the cattleman at the heart of it all. The ancient rock formation rose like a silent sentinel against the cruel desert sun, its jagged edges casting fractured shadows over the parched earth, where the cattleman and the Apache child finally found respite. The boy's bare feet pressed lightly against the worn stones, each contact reverberating with a whispered memory of forgotten times. He lingered there, fingers tracing invisible patterns on the rough surface, eyes closed as if communing with unseen guardians long departed. This was hallowed ground, the sacred heart of his people, where the veil between worlds thinned and the spirits whispered their truths. The cattleman watched him, uncertain and skeptical. The harsh lines of his weathered face softened just a fraction under the weight of something unspoken. For years he'd believed in the tangible, the grit beneath his nails, the muzzle of his rifle, the way the sun scorched the land until it cracked like old leather. Spirits, ancestors, these were tales to temper the loneliness, stories to soothe restless nights. But here, with the boy kneeling reverently, hallowed murmurs seemed to ripple across the silent air, and the man felt a stirring deep in his chest, an unfamiliar ache of respect and unease. The boy finally opened his eyes, pools of dark intensity reflecting the lifeless sky above. "This place holds power. The old ones watch. They see what we cannot," he said softly, voice carrying the weight of ages. "They protect those who honor the earth." He rose, clutching a small bundle wrapped in worn cloth to his chest, symbols of his heritage, artifacts passed down through generations. "Our strength comes from here, from them." The cattleman nodded slowly, feeling that fragile bridge of understanding stretch between their worlds. They were different, yet bound by survival, tied by desperation in this merciless wasteland. But before either could speak further, a sudden sound tore through the stillness. the harsh rattle of hooves pounding fiercely against stone and sand. His jaw clenched, the man's steely gaze sharpening as figures emerged into sight. The cazador, the hunter, and his ruthless band had arrived, faces grim and eyes alight with merciless intent. Their shadows fell dark and accusing across the ancient stones, desecrating the fragile peace. "Damn it!" the cattleman growled, hand instinctively moving toward his rifle. "They found us." The boy's breath hitched, fingers tightening on the sacred bundle. "They come for me," he whispered, fear and defiance mingling in his tone. "My blood calls to them, takes them away from reason. But we stand here now. We face what comes." The cattleman's voice dropped low but fierce. "I'll stand with you, but this time I can't hide behind rocks or shadows." Years of solitude, of holding back, broke apart in the gaze he cast toward his adversaries. For the first time, vulnerability gave way to a raw, unyielding courage. A tense silence blossomed between the two sides, the desert itself seeming to hold its breath. Then, with sudden, violent energy, the hunter's men charged, dust swirling, fists swinging, weapons flashing like deadly fire under the high sun. The cattleman fought with everything he had. His movements were desperate and unpolished, but fueled by a protective fury. Blows landed, backs collided with the cruel stone, and amid the chaos, his breath came ragged, sweat stinging dirt-matted hair. The boy, though smaller and less trained, moved with uncanny agility, sidestepping, shouting warnings, drawing strength from the sacred ground beneath their feet. But even as the fight raged, the man's heart thudded sharply with a gnawing dread. Where was the boy? His eyes flicked from the skirmish to the shadows beyond the rocks, to the silent crevices where the desert hid its secrets. And then, a sudden, chilling absence. The child was gone. A hollow clench gripped the cattleman's chest, sharp and cold. His gaze darted frantically, scouring cracks and caves, searching for any sign of movement, any whispered hint of where the boy might have fled. But the rocks swallowed the silence like a grave. "No," he breathed, disbelief faltering on his lips. The chaos of the fight faded, replaced by the pounding isolation of loss and fear. Doubts clawed at him. Had his hesitation cost the boy their fragile bond? Had his moment of weakness let the darkness steal what fragile hope remained? Hands trembling, the cattleman lowered himself against the rough stone face, the arid wind tugging at his collar as if mocking his helplessness. The desert stretched endless, indifferent. Somewhere beneath this merciless sky, the boy was out there, alone, vulnerable, yet perhaps guided by spirits stronger than flesh and blood. He pressed his fingers to his lips in a silent plea. "Come back, find me again." The sun dipped beyond the horizon, bleeding molten gold over the rocks. Shadows deepened, swallowing the last light and cloaking the land in uncertainty. The cattleman rose, gut hollow, but resolve born anew, burning in his eyes. He would not surrender. The boy's disappearance was a wound, but also a summons to face the desert's cruel trials, to walk its haunted paths in search of lost kinship and salvation. As night wrapped its cold fingers around the wasteland, The man lifted his weathered face to the star-stilled sky, the ancient constellations flickering softly like distant memories. Somewhere, the boy's spirit whispered on the wind, a fragile beacon in the growing darkness. And beneath the vault of endless night, the cattleman stepped forward, shadows falling behind him like the weight of sand whipped across his face in angry bursts. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a storm of grit and wind threatened to erase the world's edges. Yet against this fury, every bone in his body ached, with a singular purpose. He had to find the boy. He could not let the desert swallow him whole. The old memories clawed at the man with each grueling step. Faces long lost flickered in the heat haze, ghosts of kinship and regret, a family fractured by fate, a man hardened by years of solitude, weighed down by failures he dared not voice aloud. The boy was more than a chance at survival. It was a chance for redemption, a fleeting thread of hope twisted around scars that refused to heal. A sudden gust shrieked past, carrying dust like a ravenous beast. The cattleman pulled his hat lower, eyes searching the horizon for any sign, a footprint, a broken branch, a whisper of movement. Then, beneath a skeletal mesquite tree, his gaze caught a symbol etched into the rough bark, a spiraling design, ancient and deliberate. He crouched to trace the grooves with trembling fingers, the heat beneath him forgotten. It was the boy's mark, the silent language of a people bound to the desert's secret veins. A message left behind, a beacon carved for those who would follow the path. The cattleman's breath hitched, a shard of determination cut through his weariness. The child was alive, and he had left a way forward. The barren landscape stretched vast, but the symbol spoke of a refuge, a place where the desert's harsh hand softened in shadow and sanctuary. Without hesitation, the cattleman rose, shouldered his burdens, and set his course toward the promise hidden beyond the relentless sun. His progress was slow, beaten down by blistering winds and the weight of visible and invisible foes. Nightfall brought a fragile calm, but the dangers never waned. Silent creatures skulked in the darkness, eyes gleaming with hunger. The man's fingers lingered on the grip of his revolver, heart pounding with the rhythm of an ancient drum. Fear and fierce resolve entwined. As his boots scraped over the stony ground, memories resurfaced, jagged and raw. He saw his younger self in the mirror of regret, once full of pride and blind conviction, lost to the same desert that now threatened to claim this boy. Every misstep carved a line of sorrow, every breath he drew a desperate plea for absolution. Protecting this child was a chance to right those wrongs, to live and fight for something greater than himself. But the desert was not emptiness. It was a crucible. It tested men and boys alike, forging and breaking them in equal measure. The cattleman's eyes narrowed as they caught a flicker of movement, what might have been a shadow or a trick of the fading light. Every sense sharpened. Danger lurked still, human and otherwise. A distant cry cut through the night, wild and sudden. The cattleman paused, heart hammering. The desert's silence, offered no comfort. It was a waiting silence, heavy with unshed storms. He pressed onward, his breath clouding in the chill air, each step a prayer, each heartbeat a promise to the boy still out there in the vast wilderness. In the dwindling light, he reached a stand of twisted junipers, gnarled as the hands of time. Here, beneath their skeletal limbs, he paused again. The symbol, the promise of refuge, tugged at something deeper, a call to the stubborn grit of survival, and the fragile thread of trust between two lost souls. Sweat mingled with dust on his brow, but his gaze hardened like flint. Whispers drifted on the breeze, half-remembered lessons, the boy's faint voice echoing in the silent spaces between heartbeat and breath. The cattleman crouched, pressing a palm to the earth, feeling the pulse of the land beneath him. This wasteland, for all its cruelty, still held secrets, pockets of life carved from desperation and hope. The night stretched on, a dark canvas studded with stars that watched cold and distant. The cattleman stoked the embers of an invisible fire, his shadow flickering against jagged rocks. His mind raced with fleeting images of the boy's smile, the silent courage in his eyes, the sacred language of a people woven into the desert itself. Hours passed in tense stillness. The cattleman knew the hunters were never far behind, their malice a relentless tide. But he could not stop. He would not stop. Then, as dawn smoldered low on the horizon, a whisper caught his ear, a faint sound of movement, deliberate and soft. Heart hammering, he rose slowly, scanning the rocky maze before him. Ahead, nestled in a shallow hollow, a figure stirred, the boy, alive. Before the cattleman could call out, the child's gaze lifted, sharp and steady, despite the hardship etched into every line of his young face. There was a strength there now, a fire fed by ordeal, a secret knowledge born in desert shadows. The cattleman saw it and felt the weight of their shared journey settle between them, unspoken but unmistakable. The boy's voice broke the dawn's silence, low and certain. A place waits, where the old ones still walk. We must go. The cattleman nodded, resolve settling like armor. He lifted his rifle, his breath steady, despite the fear clawing beneath his ribs. This was no longer just a hunt for survival. It was a mission of spirit and blood, one that would test the very essence of their souls and the fragile bond sewn beneath a merciless sun. Behind them, the noise of the approaching hunters began to rise, a grim chorus of pursuit that would not relent. The cattleman's grip tightened. He met the boy's gaze, the silent vow passing between them. Together, they stepped forward into the dawn's pale light. The desert vast and watching, and the dance of fate tightening its hold. The cattleman spotted fresh hoof prints pounding toward them, dust trailing like an oncoming storm, heralding the hunter's worst fury. The refuge lay hidden within a ragged patch of desert scrub, nestled beneath the sheltering arms of twisted mesquite and weathered junipers. The cattleman's boots made soft prints in the dry soil as he approached cautiously, every sense sharpened to the slightest sound or movement. The air smelled faintly of smoke and earth, a fragile trace of life amid the endless wasteland's austerity. He spotted the boy first, standing still among the shadows cast by the low rocks. Despite the thinness and wear of his frame, there was a calmness now in his posture, a quiet belonging that hadn't been there before. Around him, a few figures in dusty, worn garb moved with ease, other Apaches who bore the desert scars like armor. Faces weathered but eyes bright with ancient resolve. They regarded the cattleman and the boy with wary curiosity, a tension woven between hospitality and the instinct to protect a fragile haven. The cattleman's gaze swept the makeshift settlement, simple tents woven from canvas and hides, fires crackling low, and quiet murmurs drifting through the dusk. This was no mere campsite. It was a sanctuary held together by whispered bonds and resilience. A place where the old ways survived, hidden from prying eyes and the brutal hands that sought to erase them. The boy turned, his dark eyes meeting the cattleman's with a glimmer of both relief and something sharper, determination. "They are here," he said, voice soft but firm. "The others say it is safer here, but safer does not mean free." The cattleman nodded, understanding settling like dust in his chest. He had seen too many such places fall, too many lives shattered under the weight of greed and violence. "So what do we do? Stay and hide in the shadows? Or face those coming with fire in their hearts?" A murmur rose among the Apache gathered nearby. An elder woman stepped forward, her face etched with lines carved over generations of hardship. Her voice was steady, but laced with warning. "The desert shelters us, but it cannot protect us forever. The hunter grows bolder. He seeks what is ours by right and by blood." The cattleman's jaw tightened. "I swore I'd keep the boy safe." His gaze shifted to the child, now quiet, clutching a carved talisman pressed close to his chest. "I'm no stranger to fight, but this is more than anything I've faced. Not just men, but the ghosts of past sins." The boy looked up, a flicker of ancestral pride flashing through his tired eyes. "The spirits do not abandon us. They walk beside us here. We have strength if we stand together, but if we scatter, we are nothing." Even as the words hung heavy in the cooling air, a sudden clamoring in the distance pulled all eyes to the horizon. The cattleman's breath hitched. From the swirling dust emerged riders, figures riding hard and fast, the dull gleam of weapons catching the last fiery light. The hunter had brought reinforcements. "Too many," whispered one of the Apaches, gripping a worn spear. "They come to burn the last of our home." The cattleman stepped in front of the boy instinctively, shoulders squared like a battered shield. His measured, hardened voice carried over the restless murmurs. "If they want a fight, they'll get one, but not by breaking us apart." The community members scrambled to prepare, stamping down loose soil, gathering weapons crude and lethal, hearts steeling against fear. The boy closed his eyes briefly, whispering prayers to voices long silent to most, drawing on the old strength that ran like rivers beneath the desert's skin. The wind carried the distant thunder of hooves closer. Shadows lengthened, eyes flared with fierce light. The moment perched on a knife's edge, The cattleman surveyed the faces around him. He saw in them the echo of his own solitary battles, a blend of fear and fury, grief and unyielding hope. Here in this hidden valley carved from desolation, something fragile was unfolding, a chance not just to survive, but to stand and fight for more than mere life. The boy reached out, his small hand resting on the man's rough forearm, grounding them both. "We must hold fast, together." A flash of determination broke through the cattleman's usual stoicism. He nodded, the hardness in his eyes melting into iron resolve. "Then we fight as one." The dust erupted behind the approaching band, bounding like a living storm, voices hoarse with rage and intent, rising sharp and cruel. The cattleman lifted his worn rifle slowly, the weight of his past and present grounding him. His steady hands belied the rage swelling beneath. The desert air vibrated with imminent violence. The last refuge of the Apaches trembled beneath the gathering storm. And then, through the thickening haze of heat and tension, the hunter himself emerged, eyes gleaming with merciless purpose, the twisted smile of a man who believed the desert and its children belonged to him. The cattleman's heart slammed against his ribs. His voice was a growl, low and raw. "This ends here." Yet before either side could move, a sharp cry split the chaos. The boy was nowhere to be found. The crowd turned as one, searching desperate eyes across the rocky shadows. The cattleman froze, dread sinking cold and heavy through his veins. The child was gone again. The last light faded, swallowed by gathering darkness, as the desert held its breath, waiting for the inevitable blow, the fracture that would come in the next dawn. The hunter's horse pawed the earth impatiently, ears flicking, sensing the sudden void. The cattleman's voice broke the tense silence, barely more than a whisper, but edged with iron. They threatened to destroy the last sanctuary and take the boy. The wind swept through the silent refuge like a warning. The desert's silence was shattered once again. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the hidden refuge nestled beneath the skeletal branches of mesquite and juniper. The cattleman stood firm, a living bulwark between the approaching storm and the fragile sanctuary. His eyes, sharp beneath the battered hat, scanned the ragged faces of his Apache allies, men and women bound by silent oaths and weathered scars. They moved among tents woven from canvas and hide, gripping crude weapons with hands steady in spite of the tightening grip of fear. The boy stood close by, small but resolute, clutching the carved talisman pressed tight to his chest. His dark eyes caught the glimmer of the settling dusk and seemed to drink it in. Around him, the murmurs of his people betrayed their unease, the tension of a calm moment before the storm. Yet in that stillness, the boy whispered an ancient prayer, his voice low but imbued with fierce determination. The spirits were watching. They did not turn away. The cattleman's jaw tightened. "They come for more than just blood," he muttered. "They want to snuff out what's left of this place. But I swore to keep you safe. I won't let them take you." A weathered elder woman stepped forward, the lines of her face etched with generations of hardship and wisdom. Her voice held steady as she spoke, the weight of her words sinking into the cool desert air. The desert has protected us, but even its embrace has limits. The hunter's hunger grows. His shadow darkens the valley with each passing sun. The group exchanged grim looks. The cattleman nodded, feeling the familiar sting of duty sharpen inside him. He was no stranger to battle, but this fight cut deeper than flesh and blood. A war for survival, for legacy. He glanced down at the boy. The small figure radiated a quiet strength, a fierce pride drawn from the land itself. "We either stand together," the boy said firmly, "or we lose everything. The spirits give us courage if we have the will to fight." The cattleman's gaze swept across the hidden encampment. The flickering fires, the rough tents, the faces marked by weariness and resolve. He felt an unexpected swell of unity among them, a binding that defied the harshness of the desert and the cruelty on its horizon. Then, without warning, the distant rumble of hooves shattered the fragile quiet, an angry thunder rolling across the cracked earth. Dust rose like a wild beast's breath, swirling through the narrowing gap between earth and sky. "They're coming," a scout whispered, gripping his spear tighter. The cattleman's hand instinctively moved to the worn rifle at his side, the familiar weight grounding him, even as adrenaline surged through his veins. From the swirling horizon emerged a ragged dozen riders, faces hard with merciless intent, eyes gleaming with the cold fire of obsession. The hunter himself led the charge, a cruel smirk etched on his weathered face, his every movement brimming with the certainty of a man who believed the desert and its children belonged to him. The cattleman squared his shoulders, stepping forward to shield the boy. His voice cut through the mounting tension like dry thunder. "If they want a fight, they'll get one, but not by breaking us." The Apache community moved swiftly, gathering weapons and deepening resolve. The crackling of fires was drowned by pounding hooves that closed the distance with raw urgency. The boy closed his eyes briefly, drawing upon the strength of ghosts and old promises etched into the very stones beneath their feet. Riders swept forward, a whirlwind of dust, fury, and clashing steel. The cattleman fought with fierce desperation, each blow a strike born of protection and unspoken remorse. Around him, the boy darted with uncanny agility, words of warning and encouragement slipping from his lips. The sacred ground pulsed beneath them, a silent source of power amid chaos. But amid the brutal fray, a sharp silence pierced the man's awareness. The boy was gone. Panic surged like a firestorm. The cattleman's breath hitched. His eyes darted wildly, searching the jagged shadows, the fissures between rocks where hope flickered and faded. The desert swallowed the child's presence, leaving nothing but the hollow echo of absence. Hands trembling, the cattleman sank against a rock's rough edge, the weight of loss and fear crashing with unbearable force. Doubts gnawed. Had he failed? Had the moment to protect slipped through his fingers like desert sand? The wind carried distant battle cries, but his world narrowed to the empty space where the boy had stood. He pressed fingers to cracked lips, a whispered plea carried on the dry breeze. come back. Find me again." Night fell like a shroud, the stars watching in cold silence. The cattleman rose, the pain of loss tempered by a burgeoning fire of resolve. He would scour every inch of this merciless land until he found the boy, until he restored the fragile bond shattered in the chaos. The desert held its breath once more, vast and indifferent, and the battle, far from over, was only beginning. The thunder of hooves grew louder, a cruel echo riding on the wind. The cattleman's eyes fixed on the distant dust cloud, narrowing in grim determination. Then, from the tumult, a thunderous cry rang out, sharp and sudden, a desperate call that tore through the desert night. The cattleman stiffened. His heart slammed like a war drum. He was separated from the boy on the battlefield. Dust swirled violently around the ragged cluster of mesquite and juniper as the cattleman's heavy boots stirred the dry earth beneath him. He braced against the wind, eyes narrowing across the hidden refuge. The sun's last cruel embers cast long shadows over the worn tents and wary faces of the small Apache community gathered within. Their breaths faltered in sync with the tightening knot in his chest, a warning none could ignore. The boy stood close, clutching the carved talisman to his chest with steady fingers, his gaze locked on the horizon where the sun had finally given up its fight. Despite the exhaustion etched deep into his slender frame, there was a fierce calm to him now, an ember glowing beneath the dust and weariness. Around them, flickering campfires fought the growing dark, their flames fragile yet defiant, much like the people drawn to them. The cattleman spoke low, voice rough, with years of solitude and battles fought, both outside and within. They come for more than blood. They come to snuff out whatever's left of this place. His eyes fell to the boy's resolute face. "And I swore I'd keep you safe. I won't let 'em take you, not while breath still burns in my lungs." An elder woman stepped forward from the circle of gathered Apaches, her face a map of weathered lines and hard-earned wisdom. She spoke with a voice steady as stone, yet heavy with the weight of her people's history. "The desert has been our shield," she murmured, "but even the strongest shield cracks when the shadow is long and hunger is deep. The hunter grows bolder each day." Around her, the community exchanged nervous glances, hands tightening around crude weapons, spears, bows, knives fashioned from bone and stone. The cattleman felt the tension pulse like a storm on the verge of breaking, but within that suffocating pressure, the boy's voice cut through, quiet but unyielding. "We either stand together," the child said, "or we lose everything we've held on to. The spirits walk with us and give strength to those with courage enough to face the storm." The cattleman's gaze swept the encampment over faces marked by quiet fear and fierce resolve. His breath caught as something like a rough unity settled over them, a fragile but unmistakable bond forged through shared hardship. He squared his shoulders, feeling the old loneliness give way to something harder and purer: solidarity. Suddenly, the distant rumble shattered the silence, like thunder ripping the sky. Foothills erupted in a cloud of dust as hooves pounded violently against the cracked earth. The air grew thick with the raw scent of sweat and leather, and as the thunder approached, every eye snapped toward the horizon. "They're coming," murmured a scout, tightening his grip on a spear stained with wear and past bloodshed. The cattleman's hand instinctively found his rifle, worn but steady, a familiar weight anchoring him amid the rising storm. From that swirling dust emerged a band of riders, ragged men, grim and merciless, their faces etched with obsession and cruelty. Leading them was the hunter himself, a man whose smile twisted with dark certainty, someone who believed this desert, its secrets, and its children belonged to him alone. The cattleman stepped forward, placing himself between the boy and the thunderous advance, his voice cutting sharply through the tense air. "If they want a fight, they'll get one, but not by tearing us apart." The Apache companions moved swiftly, weaponry drawn, eyes blazing with fierce resistance. The air vibrated with tension, the roadside fires sputtering in defiance as the riders closed the distance. When the charge hit, it was a wild storm of dust, fists, and ringing steel. The cattleman fought with desperate fury. His blows were raw, unrefined, but powered by a fierce love born of long loneliness and newfound responsibility. Around him, the boy moved with a predatory grace, yelling warnings, drawing on the sacred strength buried deep in his blood and the hallowed ground beneath their feet. Yet amid the chaos, a sudden stillness gripped the cattleman's heart like ice. His eyes darted around, searching for the boy, only to find empty shadows, silent spaces where the child had stood moments before. Panic surged through him, ruthless and unrelenting. His breath caught, chest tightening, as desperation clawed in an agonizing tide. The boy was gone. The battle cries faded to a murmur as the cattleman's world shrank to that jagged absence. He pressed trembling hands to the rough stone at his back, sweat and dust mingling as remorse and fear crashed down like the desert's merciless sun. Had he failed to guard the fragile promise they'd forged? Had his moment of weakness ripped apart a bond only just shaped by hope and survival? His fingers brushed cracked lips, a whispered plea lost amid the wind's cold moan. "Come back, find me again." Night fell abruptly, swallowing the encampment in a blanket of cold stars and silence. Yet beneath the vast, indifferent sky, the cattleman's resolve ignited anew. The pain of loss would not claim him. He would scour every shadow, chase every whisper across this endless wasteland until the boy was found again, until the fragile thread was rewoven. But the desert offered no mercy. The pounding of hooves returned, sharper and closer, voices carrying a cruel promise on the dry wind. The cattleman's eyes locked on the swelling dust cloud that devoured the horizon, an unyielding storm closing fast, tearing his world apart. He gritted his teeth as a harsh cry shattered the night, a desperate, piercing call that ripped across the battlefield. In that moment, he realized a brutal truth that tore through his soul. He was separated from the boy on the battlefield. The last rays of the sun spilled across the desert wasteland, painting the jagged rocks and sparse greenery in hues of orange and crimson. The cattleman stood tall, despite the deep weariness that clung to his bones, a steadfast sentinel guarding the fragile sanctuary of the Apache community. Around him, muted whispers and the soft shuffle of feet echoed, preparations for what was to come. The boy, clutching the carved talisman tightly to his chest, stood close by, his dark eyes steady, reflecting a fire that no hardship had yet managed to scorch. From the distant horizon, the relentless thunder of hooves grew louder, tearing through the stillness. Dust clouds billowed, like ghosts chasing the sun's final breath. The hunter rode at their head, his cruel smile a scar across the fading light. His men tensed for the violence that was inevitable. This was the moment the cattleman had feared, no longer a spectator, but a man who must draw the line between survival and surrender. The community gathered, spears grasped firmly, bows strung tight, faces etched with raw determination. The elder woman's voice rose above the murmurs, an unyielding cadence carrying ancestral strength. "Hold your ground. The spirits guide us." The cattleman's weathered hands gripped his rifle, knuckles white but steady. "If they want to break us, they'll have to take what's left of our courage first." As the enemy charged, the air exploded with fury and desperation. Dust blinded, fists swung, and the clash of steel echoed like lightning over parched earth. The cattleman moved like a tempest, each strike a promise etched in flesh and bone. His eyes burned with a mix of regret and resolve, the weight of his past shaping every desperate blow. The boy darted through the chaos, light as a shadow, shouting warnings, his voice carrying ancient power that seemed to infuse the defenders with otherworldly courage. Amid the fight, a sudden cold grasp seized the cattleman's heart. His breath caught as he searched the throng of bodies, and the boy was gone. Fear surged like fire. The battlefield's roar dimmed beneath the pounding of his own frantic pulse. His gaze tore through rock and dust, desperate for even a whisper, a flicker of movement. But the boy had vanished, swallowed by shadows sharper than any blade. "No!" the cattleman gasped, dropping to one knee, hands trembling as he pressed against dusty stone. The sacred talisman was no longer in sight. Doubt clawed at his soul. Had he failed to shield the fragile hope they had kindled? Had his moment of strength slipped away unnoticed, leaving only emptiness? The cries around him grew distant, swallowed by the desert's indifferent silence. The cattleman's weary eyes lifted to the star-pricked sky, searching for guidance in the ancient constellations. Somewhere beyond, the boy's spirit lingered, a fragile flame flickering in the vast darkness, waiting to be found again. With battered hands, he steadied himself and rose, spine rigid despite the ache that threatened to fold him. "I won't give up on you," he whispered, voice rough but fierce. "Wherever you are, I will find you." Days blurred into nights as the cattleman pursued every trace, following the sacred symbol carved into bark, the whispers of old spirits guiding his path. He braved scorching heat and biting cold, outwitting dangers both human and wild, driven by a stubborn hope born from shared hardship. Finally, beneath a sky heavy with dawn's promise, he discovered the boy, nestled among the jagged embrace of a rocky hollow, surrounded by the quiet strength of the hidden Apache community. Their eyes met, tired but alive, and in that glance lived the entire story of their journey. Loss, resilience, and a bond deeper than words. The boy rose slowly, clutching the talisman as if it embodied the pulse of the earth itself. "This place will hold us," he said softly. "The old ones' voices are strong here." The cattleman smiled, a rough edge to it born of exhaustion and relief. "And I won't leave it without you." Together, they stepped into the circle of the community, embraced in shared purpose. The cattleman's heart, long guarded behind layers of solitude, softened as he accepted the connection he had tried to deny. The strength in compassion, the hope in unity. Time passed beneath sun and stars, the desert's fierce gaze softened by the quiet. Renewal of trust and kinship. The cattleman's rugged hands became tools not just of survival, but of building, repairing tents, tending fires, planting roots in the shale-soaked soil. The boy taught the old songs anew, translating whispers of the past into gestures of protection and peace. In their union, the community found renewed courage, a promise that what was once desolate could become home. At night, beneath an all-encompassing sky, the cattleman and the boy sat side by side, gazing into flickering embers. The cattleman spoke softly, voice low and thick with emotion. "I carried the weight of my past like a chain, but with you, I've learned to bear it like a trust." The boy nodded, eyes reflecting the flames and the endless stars beyond. "We are bound by the land, by blood, and by hope. The desert is harsh, but it also teaches. Life grows from its cracks if we are willing to nurture it." Their laughter, scarce but genuine, wove through the still night as a promise that even in the harshest places, new beginnings are born. The cattleman's compassion, once hidden beneath scars and silence, was a blessing unseen but deeply felt. The boy's spirit, fierce and untamed, held the promise of a future where survival was victory and peace was the legacy. The desert, once a wasteland of loss, now hummed with life and quiet dreams. Beneath the wide sky, a new story had taken root, one of unity between a hardened stranger and an Apache child, intertwined by fate and choice. And in that story lay the seed of a lasting peace, growing slowly but surely in the unforgiving heart of the desert.